welcome to another episode of the VYPE podcast. It's just me, Will Turboff, here today with Robert Gonson out, but we still have a very exciting episode to show you all this week. We're going to talk about some 6A baseball, and we have an interview with Cy-Fair Catcher Spencer Limmer. But let's go ahead and kick it off with the baseball results from the last week. So Koppel and Dallas Jesuit played each other. Dallas Jesuit, who very likely has the number one pick in the MLB draft this year in Jordan Lawler, they actually lost the series to Koppel. Koppel will play Prosper this week in the quarterfinals matchup. Plano, who was an underdog last week that we talked about, fourth-seeded team, they won again. They're yet to lose a playoff game. Swept two straight series. They already beat a district winner, and this past week beat a district runner-up. Over here on the Houston side, Jersey Village beat Fort Bend Travis in back-to-back games after being blown out in the first game. They are going to play Katy. Katy's a really fun team. It's a team that Robert and I and Tinley, if you remember her, we all got to cover early on in the season. They have some really great chemistry, and I know that's going to be a tough series for Jersey Village. As for Pearland, another fourth-seeded team, they swept Kingwood in two really high-scoring games. They're going to face North Shore. North Shore stunned Alvin. A lot of people, like myself, thought Alvin was going to be one of those teams to go really far in the playoffs. District 23 was really tough. Pearland is one. Pearland, Shadow Creek, and Straight Jesuit, those last two teams we will talk about a little bit later on. They're the three that are staying from District 23. The winner, Alvin, is the first one out. So in the series between North Shore and Alvin, there was a lot of high-quality pitching from North Shore. That's what ended up getting them the victory. They lost the first two games. I believe they only gave up one run in the second two combined. As for that Stratford and Tompkins series, this one got a lot of coverage because the managers of those series were actually brothers. Those were the Humphreys brothers, Kyle and Keith. I believe their dad threw out the first pitch there. It's a really great moment, and it was an amazing series. So the teams met earlier on this season, and Tompkins had just kind of slipped away with a win. It was 7-6, so a lot of people knew this was going to be a tight series. Tompkins comes in as one of the more highly touted teams in the area, especially in the city of Houston or the surrounding areas. So in the first game of the series, Tompkins really dominated. It was 18-2, and then Stratford in the second game had a 2-1 walk-off victory. So no one really knew what to expect. A really high-scoring game from Tompkins in the first one, and they score 17 less runs than they do in game one. In that game three, there was a walk-off, but it was in the fifth inning because of that mercy rule. Graydon West, who is committed to Rice, and we hope to have on the show next week, he had that walk-off home run in the fifth inning. So Tompkins advances. They will play Cy-Fair. We're going to get to hear a lot about that with our interviewer this week, Spencer Limmer, who is Cy-Fair's catcher. Cy-Fair is 3-0 in the playoff games. They swept Heights in the first round, and then they opted to face Cinco Ranch in a one-game series. So two really dominant teams so far. It's kind of hard to believe that Tompkins has already lost a playoff game. Stratford was a really great team. We knew once we saw the bracket that they were going to have to play a really great team early on, and that's exactly what they did. So Tompkins and Cy-Fair played each other in 2019. It was an area series like the series we just saw last week. Cy-Fair won in 3 games. They're definitely going to be the underdogs coming into this one. So two District 23 teams, like I said earlier, will be playing each other. Shadow Creek, they continued their dominance. They swept another series. It was against Summer Creek this time. They had to come back in game 2, though. So a lot of the year, we've seen Shadow Creek take really dominating leads. They've got a lot of great hitters on their team, but they struggled quite a bit in some of these games. They were down by 1 run, ended up winning by a couple. So 2-game series for them. As for Straight Jesuit, a 2-game series for them against Atascocita, who's a team that they were honestly a little bit scared to face. And I talked to some of the players earlier in the weeks. This was a team that they were trying to avoid. They ended up winning in 2 games. Great pitching performances in both games. Garrett Stratton and Andy Leon have turned out to be just amazing pitchers. Andy Leon will be playing at the collegiate level next year. Garrett Stratton off to Rice in a couple years. So Shadow Creek, Straight Jesuit playing each other, Cy-Fair Tompkins. There are going to be so many amazing matchups throughout the state, throughout all of 6A, but specifically in the Houston area. So many to look forward to. If you want to see these games, most of them are going to be in the Goose Creek Memorial Stadium, excuse me, the park over there, and some of the surrounding parks in that area. Let's go ahead and hand it over to my interview with Spencer Limmer now. All right, we are here with Cy-Fair's catcher, Spencer Limmer. Spencer, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good, and you guys have been on a really good run. We'll get on that in just a minute. But let's go ahead and start off talking about, the high school career that you've had, the year that you've had. So you're committed to Murray State College, which, Murray State University is what I originally thought it was. But tell me a little bit about the program down there and why it was attractive to you.
Well, really had happened because Wichita State, their catching coach had wanted to offer me, and they didn't have the money due to COVID because they got cut. So he was like, "Well, we want you to go check out this junior college that we get a lot of guys from." So I was like, "All right, I'll go and check it out." And then I went up there and practiced with the team a little bit and just felt the environment. And for JUCO, for me, I thought that was probably my best route just to get me more developed and just have another few years under my belt of college and get on my feet again for school and just get used to the college life.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen so many guys come out of that, do that JUCO route and, eventually move on to bigger programs or go pro or however that is. But what's your plan right now? What's the best case scenario there?
Best case is I'll hopefully go there for a year or two and then be able to transfer out to either Wichita or even like same division and same level of play.
Yeah, well, I mean, you said you've got the connection there at Wichita State, and that's a really great program, and I'm sure that could happen.
Yeah.
But is it right that you're the only college committed player on Cy-Fair's team right now, or are there a couple other ones?
Well, we have another pitcher who's going to Murray with me, and then we have another guy who's about to commit to University of St. Thomas, and then we have a few other guys that are going on visits right now and just deciding which ones they want to commit to.
Yeah, so in just a second, I'll talk about the guys that you're going to be playing at Tompkins, which is a team just stacked with college committed athletes. What has that kind of been like with, a team full of guys that are just kind of nitty gritty, maybe under the radar type of players? Have you felt like underdogs all year?
Well, we knew going into this year, like there's a lot of questions and like who would fill in what spots. And it was just, we didn't know what to expect going into this season, but really when we were going through the tournaments, it was rough a little bit, just finding out spots and trust and our energy and stuff like that we need. But really when we started finding out who's our primary spots and who's going to stay there during districts, I mean, really we felt like we had it. Like we knew we had the energy, we had the trust, we had the team bonding. And I mean, that's just how Cy-Fair is. We've always been gritty.
Yeah, and I noticed you were talking about those first couple weeks. So you had 8 losses this season. Those first couple weeks, you took a couple in tournaments, and that was about half of the losses in your season. What changed from then? And March 23rd is the date that I kind of picked because you've only had 1 loss since March 23rd. That's almost been 2 months now. So what was the shift coming out of those early season tournaments, kind of going through the first stretch there, and then since end of March, what have the different phases of the season been like?
Well, like you said, like we took a couple of losses, a couple of punches at the early season, obviously, but I mean that's always kind of expected for a young new team that has a lot of new varsity guys coming on. But I mean, other than that, like we knew going into the districts that we weren't going to be undefeated district champs. That's just how it is, just the way our district is. But we knew it was going to be a grind, and when we took that win against Stratford, we knew that we knew something was there, and then we went over there and we just took an L. Like we took a punch to the face, but it really it was like a learning for us. It was just to find out who we are. And then in the middle of the season, after we had lost to Jersey Village at their place, our coach kind of just sat us down in the locker room, was like, it's still there for y'all. Y'all can still take it. It's just whether or not y'all want to bear down and go get it. So
Yeah. So I mean, you're in one of the best districts in baseball. Early in the season, we had talked about that this was just going to be a really hard district for anybody to win, and you guys really weren't the favorites. I mean, there's a lot of teams in there, like you said, Jersey Village, Stratford, Cy Ridge is in the mix too. Um, but what can you say about the other teams in the district and what that competition was like this year?
I mean, it's like you said, it's one of the top districts to play in, and there's always going to be that competition. Like a few years back, how there was Rydell and all the bigger players and everything, and then there's a new wave that kind of came through this year, but we really didn't know just by the standings. You kind of just have to play it week by week. But I mean, every week's kind of just a grind because the competition is just it. Everyone just grows as a team, and they start getting better and better each week.
Yeah, so pretty quickly you guys shift from playing a lot of tough district games, and then now you're a one seed in the playoffs. So you're automatically thought of as a team that is set to at least go to the third round, which you guys are at now that coming up on the quarterfinals right here. So first series, a 10-0 win, and then a 10-1 win against Heights. What was going on in that series? Why, how are you guys just on fire that much?
Well, our it kind of started during districts. Like we just started hitting more consistently, and we started getting the job done on the small ball and just everything else. So going into the first round, we knew that we just needed to come out with a bang and needed to show people that okay, well, we deserve to be here. And we kind of took it to heart that people were calling us the underdogs for main playoffs. So we went in, and I mean, we showed up ready to hit. I mean, we knew who was going to pitch and how he was, and we wanted to attack early.
Yeah, and you sure did attack. I mean, 20-1 combined in those two games. And then last round, you played a one-game series, which not a lot of people did. We saw a lot more of that in the first round. You ended up doing it in the area round against Cinco Ranch in a 2-0 win. The bats weren't on fire as much there. So what's going to be, what's been the focus in these last couple days? I know you're starting to practice again. Maybe got a couple days off during the weekend, but what's going to be the deciding factor in the series against Tompkins?
It's just who can make the routine plays more and who can just do the small ball and who executes more at the plate and in the field. And I mean, it's who gives up the less what we call freebies and walks and hit by base, like everything like that.
Yeah, and you have it's going to go both ways, obviously. But Cy-Fair and Tompkins met each other in this round or the second round of the playoffs in 2019. Obviously, there were no playoffs last year due to the COVID shutdown. What can you remember about that 2019 team? And I know there's still some of the players, Jason Violet, Graydon West are two names that come to mind.
Um, well, there he was young. I mean, our 2019, he was young. That was a young team, but they were still a hard team to beat. And I don't know if you remember or anything like that, but we played until pretty much 1:30 in the morning because of delays and everything. And that series was just a grind in general because we knew going into it that they were a good team, that they were going to give it our best. I mean, so it was just a grind as a whole for that series. And that's how it's going to be for this round too.
Yeah, this whole bracket right here has really been incredible, and if you win, there will be an even better team maybe waiting for you. So what are you most excited about? We'll finish off with this. What are you most excited about in these, not only in this series, but maybe making a state title run? What excites you the most with that?
It's just to see because I mean, we all feel like we haven't reached our peak yet in our season and like performance wise. And it's just, we're excited to see where that peak is going to be at, if it's going to be this series or if we move on to next year. I mean, it's just, it goes week by week that we're excited to see if we keep making that rise to that peak.
Yeah, well, middle of May, and you say you haven't made your peak yet. I'm sure that excites coach and the rest of the players on that team. So I'm excited to watch you guys play, not only this week, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Spencer Limmer, catcher, going to Murray State College. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so once again, I want to thank Spencer Limmer for coming on. He was such a great guest, and I'm excited to see that series between Tompkins and Cy-Fair this week. Like I said, so many great matchups in the state. Happy to see them all. Happy to be getting closer to the weekend in Round Rock, where we all hope to be at VYPEU. Until next week, I'm Will Turboff. Thanks for watching the VYPEU podcast.